First up will be Dr. Stephan Howden.
This talk is taken from one that Kevin Martin gave at the Underwater Glider User Group on our Hefring glider missions, and I've just updated it a little bit. So in background, this is a slide showing the different glider missions in the Gulf between 2017 and 2023. And the majority of them are off the shelf in 1,000 meters of water or more. You can see over West Florida Shelf where they do a lot of glider work for harmful algal blooms and fisheries that there is a lot of data there. But the Mississippi Bight region up here, there's not a lot on the shelf. So working on the shelf, we've got a lot of oil and gas platforms and infrastructure to deal with. So that's a danger to these. The other complication is we get these very strong vertical density gradients, mostly driven by all the freshwater input. And here's just a sample of 4 profiles at 20 meters depth with surface to bottom density changes of between 5 and 14, almost 15 units. And this is not the most extreme cases that we get. So there's a real challenge here to buoyancy capacity of gliders. We've had a number of missions prior to IOOS funding, and these were through the Go Marie project. We had a G1 shallow water pump glider that was unable to get through these gradients, and then we used the G2 with enhanced buoyancy pump, and it was able to work in these waters. And then there was a follow-on with another G2 with the enhanced buoyancy pump and thruster, and that was successful until it disappeared. And we found out years later that it, when there was a platform being decommissioned, that it was stuck under the structure of that platform. So in 2023, we got some supplemental funding to focus on the Mississippi Bight to measure heat content for hurricane forecasting, and also to measure the presence of strong stratification, including barrier layers. And so we decided to test a new low-cost glider called the Ocean Scout from Hefring. And here are pictures of our gliders, and it has about a 0.75 liter a buoyancy engine. That doesn't give you a lot of you need the context of the full volume and mass of the glider, and I'll show that later. But we have these 2 gliders, one with a CTD, another with a CTD and hydrophone. And just to look at density gradient capacity comparisons. So the Teledyne Webb Slocum G3, and these are rough calculations I did, with the enhanced buoyancy engine, so 1800 cc's. It's the change in volume is about 2.7%, and a change of density, equivalent change of density, is about 28.1 units, and the thruster adds equivalent of 1,000 cc's according to Teledyne, so that would be about 4.1% or 44 density units. And then the Hefring has a smaller buoyancy engine, but it's got a smaller volume and mass, and so its change in volume is about 3.5%, so in between those, and so the density gradient it can handle is in between those. So these are the missions that we did in 2024. The first one at the top was cut short because of firmware issues. So there was a lot of back and forth between us and Hefring on improvements of the firmware, since it was a very new, it's new product. And then we did a number of other missions on out and back, and one kind of east-west, and then a triangle mission. And here's some examples of the data from that. So these are so on the left is the data from the glider. So temperature at the top and salinity at the bottom, compared with the ENCOM model. And you can see some important differences in the features, including heat content. And on the left, that's the raw data from the glider that's not sent to the GTS. And here is the 1 meter data sent over Iridium to the glider DAC. So you don't lose a lot of features. And then here's the full M1 mission temperature and salinity from our glider Nori. So here's some comparisons of, and this is due thanks to Rutgers, where they're running these comparisons between the different ocean models, the NOAA and European operational models. And so you see the profiles from the different models and then the profiles from the gliders of temperature, salinity, density. And there's important differences in, especially the salinity. The models are all over the place on the upper salinity in particular. And then you get, a real change in the stratification between these. And so like the RTOFs is what's being used to initialize the hurricane forecast models. So, this data on the shelf is really important to get the models right for the hurricane forecast. So here's some statistics just to kind of show the operational of these. So we had just the 2024 for the Ocean Scout. In addition to the Teledyne Web glider, we have a sea glider that we've used a lot. So here's some, we've mostly used the sea glider. So the average days per mission from the Ocean Scout, we're getting about 15 days, contrast to 97 days for the sea glider. Lately, we've been getting much longer. We had up to, I think, 180 days. And so there's a big, you look at 15 days versus, 3 months or more, and, that's a big difference. However, if you look at the number of profiles, the Ocean Scout's operating in very shallow water, so you're getting a lot of profiles. And actually, we only record every other profile because there's so many profiles. So we have, 1,200 average profiles per mission with the Ocean Scout, as opposed to about 500 for the Sea Glider. The number going to the GTS, we don't send every profile to the GTS. For the Ocean Scout is 230 as compared to the Sea Glider, and I think there's an error in that table for the Sea Glider. And the cost per average day, just based on the battery, is, it's about double for the Ocean Scout compared to the Sea Glider. So, this Ocean Scout is really set up well for these shallow waters.
Stephen, you got about 2 minutes.
Okay. So overall, the evaluating this new technology, it allows us to operate with cheaper, so that these gliders are about a third to a quarter of the cost of a G3 or a Sea Glider. We can see the differences between the glider data and the model, showing the importance of getting this data on the shelf. Upgrades for this year that Hefring is completing for us, based on what we found last year, are some hardware upgrades that will hopefully get us a longer endurance at our depths and better power monitoring, so we better know how much battery we have left. Looking at the pros and cons, these are very small and easy to handle for one person. They're low cost. They can handle strong density gradients, and they can operate in shallow water, as little as 5 meters. They automatically generate IOOS GDAC compliant net CDFs. The cons include limited sensors, though they now are developing a biosensor that has dissolved oxygen and 3 different fluorometers. And the other con is, you get a shorter mission time, so about 15 days. But again, we may get an extension of that with the new upgrades. So, any questions?
Yeah, so I see, Pat, your hand is raised. Is that from earlier, or is that a new question?
Sorry about that. That was
That's all right.
from before.
That's
Thanks.
all right. We got time for one question if anybody has a question.
I will ask a question though.
All right, now your hand's raised again. What do you need?
Yeah. I noticed on one of your slides, Stephen, you said that the mission data was coming in about halfway through the duration of the mission. Did I interpret that right?
Yes, that was one of the missions. Because we were, it was still a little raw, the firmware and all from Hefring. So that's one of the things we worked back and forth to get set up so that it was getting to the GDAC properly. So that problem was fixed.
Okay, so it'll be real-time data in future deployments. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Perfect. Thanks, Pat. So now we'll move on to Dr. Brian DZ from Dauphin Island Sea Lab.
I can still see you change slides if you'd like to stay in this mode.
Yeah, I guess I'll just roll with this mode. Yeah, it seems fine. So I'm Brian Dzwonkowski. I'm with University of South Alabama, Dauphin Island Sea Lab. And this is a project that we are working with GCOOS on, and it's basically expanding the availability of real-time wave data. And some of the main impetus behind this was to try to help the National Weather Service get better rip current forecasts in our region. And so if we just think about waves in general, right? Waves are this fundamental feature in coastal marine environments, right? And it's one of the sort of most important aspects of marine safety, right? Real-time information is what most people going out on the water often look for to know whether or not they can go. Probably wind is up there as well, but certainly wave information is really important, right? So we have recreational people who use the water, boaters, beachgoers that want to know about waves. We also have commercial and industrial users. So think about fishers, oil and gas operations. All these people are going to make decisions based on the real-time conditions that are occurring in the coastal environment, right? Then we also have sort of just general wave data needs, right? So we have scientists and the science and management communities that require wave data, right? We have forecasters that want to validate and improve modeling efforts. We have infrastructure decisions, right? We have development, restoration efforts that are in part determined by regional wave climate. And so we have these different user groups that all need wave information, and different communities need different types of wave information. And so where I'm focused, the Mississippi Bight, one of our biggest regional interests is tourism, right? And so tourism is fundamentally connected to waves because there are risks associated with going in the water in this part of the world, really everywhere. But a lot of tourists we get aren't familiar with the ocean, and they see the Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America being perfectly flat, and they just they're not just super comfortable with it, or they get too comfortable with it. And so rip currents, I think the National Weather Service Mobile office has something like a statistic of 140 fatalities in the area of Alabama through the Florida Panhandle, and this is something like double that which occurs through other natural disasters like floods, tornadoes, lightning strikes. So it's the number one killer of people in this coastal environment. And then we also have other things like you can see, like so the lower plot here is a picture of just rip currents in a generic rip current picture, but then we have a picture of my home, Dauphin Island, and you can see some of the infrastructure decisions people have made, right? So this is sort of at the west end of Dauphin Island, and you can see that there are houses that are in imminent danger depending on what the wave conditions are going to be. There's also beach infrastructure here, beach access that is going to be severely limited by wave conditions. And so there are also sort of infrastructure issues that are going to be very dependent on the wave environment. And if you look at the Mississippi Bight, right, so we have just a screen grab from the National Data Buoy Center. And at the time we were sort of conceiving this, most of the wave buoys in our region were down. Like the Orange Beach buoy, that's this little icon here, that was down for a little while. And there's really a lot of blue water here where there isn't much wave information. So the primary one of the primary goals of this project was to get more real-time wave data into this region where we know we have stakeholders that are very interested in it. And so we want to try to support rip current warning, forecast improvement by the National Weather Service, but we also have other stakeholders that are interested just in boating and general marine operation. We also have managers that have interest in better understanding the wave climate for restoration efforts. So there are a number of, there's the primary goal, and then there's a number of secondary goals that are dependent on regional stakeholders. And so given our location and what we can reasonably get to, we were in working with the National Weather Service, we came to decide on two areas where we could provide enhanced wave information. And the two are just south of Dauphin Island, and another one would be just south of Pensacola, right? So these are relatively popular beach destinations, and they kind of fill in some of the gap between existing wave buoys that are currently providing information to stakeholders, right? And so as a part of this effort, we went through sort of a decision-making process about what technology to use. And so, here's a plot from the SOFAR buoy, or the SOFAR company that provides spotter buoys, right? You can kind of see this range in technologies where you have really big wave buoys, and then SOFAR is providing a very small, you can kind of see this picture here, which is it's a 14-pound surface float that records and delivers wave data in real time, right? And so this is a relatively low cost, easy to handle option. And so we thought, and in discussing some other regional partners, so some other IOOS regional organizations have had success using this small scale, low cost platform. And so we thought this is a pretty reasonable approach to try to enhance what's currently out there. Some of the, we have the NOAA Orange Beach buoy, which is a relatively large scale buoy. It's this sort of 3-meter discus buoy. And then USM is also providing wave data. I think they're more on the scale of the scope buoy, but Stephan Howden would know more details on that. But it's on the larger scale, more robust side of things. There's also another a data well wave rider buoy just came recently online around Louisiana. And so we're sort of filling a lower scale, a lower size scale, potentially cheaper option to provide wave data, right? And so, the mooring line that we sort of constructed for this buoy deployment sort of here, it's a pretty the scale is pretty small. We can get out to these sites with relatively small boats and turn them around relatively quickly as needed. And so this is sort of where we're at with this project, right? The idea is we're going to be delivering wave state information. So that's significant wave height, mean wave period, mean wave direction. But the spotter buoy also has some expanded capacity where it can measure hydrographic conditions, so things like water temperature. There's also atmospheric parameters, barometric pressure, and from the wave field, it also produces a wind proxy. We're not sure how good that wind proxy is, but that's one of these things we're interested in sort of exploring how good that wind proxy from the wave field is. And then we're also going to be doing some outreach work, as already mentioned. The scouts are going to be working on, we're going to be working with scouts and Chris basically to develop a national badge for rip current and waves. And then we're also going to be working, as we already mentioned, with the National Weather Service to try to get them the information they need to produce better forecasts and warnings for rip currents in this region. We also sort of discussed the potential, if these two deployment sites go well, we have the potential to maybe extend this work to additional sites that stakeholders think would be important. But we want to kind of just see how these two small scale sites go first before we try to embark on additional sites. And so I'm not sure how I'm doing time-wise, but the structure of these moorings and sort of where they're located more specifically, this just kind of gives you a sense of what the mooring structure is going to look like. It's a relatively low impact type of deployment, and so so that's sort of where we're at with this project. So people have questions, comments, thoughts. I'm happy to take them.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Any questions? All right, so I've got one. For the Scouts badge, is that something that the Scouts reached out to you guys, or how did that whole come about?
I might have to defer to Chris on this one. Chris, she's the coordinator for the outreach on this project. I don't know, Chris, if you could provide that context.
Sure, that came out of the Outreach and Education Council. So we were discussing all of the Inflation Reduction Act projects, trying to find overlap and areas of interest with our council members. And we have some folks that are heavily engaged with both the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts of America. We also have Megan Howson, who is like a long distance competitive swimmer. And so we thought it would be really great if we can combine all the resources that we have to come up with the merit badge program for both the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, and then extend the training and the curriculum that's being developed for Scouting USA to share with programs like the Red Cross and other programs that do public service swimming for public safety. So thanks, Brian. Back to you.
Nan, you have a question?
Yes, sure. Quick question. Great talk, Brian. I was wondering, is there an actual forecast of the rip currents currently? Is that something that's done?
Yeah, so I have not seen a public facing rip current warning that's readily available. So I don't know if this is an internal warning with the National Weather Service. I do know that on Dauphin Island, when there are waves of a certain height, we have these little blinky signs that just automatically start firing under certain conditions. So somebody's telling the town of Dauphin Island that or somebody's making a decision about when to flash these rip current signs. So I do think there is some sort of internal information that gets passed around. I don't think Jonathan is here today, but our partner at the National Weather Service would probably be able to better answer that question. I know when I'm sort of where I look for my marine information, I have not seen anything related to rip currents, but I do know some information is being passed around, and I don't know whether that's an internal thing and not available to the public or what. But yeah. So the short answer is I'm not sure.
All right. Brian Zelinski popped up right when you said rip current, so maybe he has something to add there.
Perhaps. I'll drop a link to it in the chat in a moment. But I was wondering about some of the data sources. You have quite the constellation of Kodar ocean sensors, CSOND, HF radars in the Gulf of America region. And while not all of them, their transmit frequencies are matched to the wave climate, some of them might be such that they can collect wave height, period, and direction measurements. I was wondering if those existing sensors may be a source of data that you'd like to explore, or was that considered and you intentionally forewent that source of wave data along the coast?
That's a good. I would say I think a lot of the issue with the HF radar network is the wave environment that it gets is a little bit far offshore for a lot of the rip current predictions. So I think the National Weather Service likes the wave information very close to shore. They were trying to push me into 5 meters of water on some of these sites, which I think is a little too close to shore. And so we've been having some discussions about how close to shore to get these buoys, and all of them are within 10 kilometers of the coast. And I think a lot of the high frequency radar, that sort of is a little bit further offshore and maybe a little bit too far offshore for the interest of rip current forecasting. And so I think that's some of what's going on there from the National Weather Service's perspective. Stephan Howden might be able to comment. I know he's running a lot of the HF radar, or one of the HF radar operators on the call might be able to answer that. How well we're getting wave data from some of the HF radar. I know it's a thing that people are looking into and doing in some areas.
Yeah, I'll let Steve answer that question a little bit because we're kind of recap a little bit. We're a little behind also. But yeah, thanks for the questions, Joe. I see your hand. We have some time at the end for some more questions. So with that, I think we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. Let people stand up and stretch and grab a coffee or go from there. So yeah, thanks again to Stephen and Brian. We'll pick back up in about 10 minutes.
Okay, I hope everyone have rejoined us. We're going to go ahead and get started with our GCOOS Investigator panel. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce that. In March of this past year, we asked our GCOOS project PIs to submit progress reports to help inform our future GCOOS strategic planning and direction, and including information about applications of their data and especially challenges and needs they've faced. And so we created this GCOOS Investigator panel to provide time for open discussion among our project PIs, our stakeholders, and our GCOOS members to ask questions and provide additional comments, and particularly on the upcoming challenges and needs that they may have. So we have 4 topical areas and panel leads, including gliders and high frequency radar. That's going to be led by Stephan Howden from USM. Joe, I know you had your hand up, so you'll get to ask your question during this particular session. We have Buoys and Moorings by Brian Dzwonkowski from Dauphin Island Sea Lab, Satellite Remote Sensing and Numerical Modeling, which is going to be led by Nan Walker from LSU. And then Ecosystems, which is going to be led by Jinping Hu from UT Austin. Each panel lead will give a very brief overview presentation on key highlights with information from our GCOOS PI progress reports, including the institutions and lead PIs within these topical areas, primary stakeholders, applications of their data, and challenges and needs. And these are very brief highlight overviews to motivate and provide context for discussion and questions. So we'll follow each presentation with 10 minutes of discussion. And everyone, please feel free to ask questions, provide comments, engage in discussion by either turning on your camera, raising your hand, or putting questions in the chat. And during the presentations for my presenters, Marcus is going to turn his camera on when you have that 1-minute warning to try to get us back on schedule. Okay, and so with that, Stephen, I'm going to turn it back over to you for gliders and high frequency radar.
Perfect. And I'll run the slides as well, Stephen. So just tell me when you're ready to go.
All right, great. So I'm ready for the next. Okay, so for gliders, the PIs were myself, John Langen from Mote Marine Laboratory, and Chad Lemke from University of South Florida. For the HF radar, it was myself and Christopher Fuller from Research Applied Technology, Education and Services. And for Fugro is Christopher Jackson. Next. So the primary stakeholders were the Naval Oceanographic Office, NOAA, IOOS Glider Data Assembly Center, EPA, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and the Florida Department of Health. The examples of applications of data. So the GCOOS focus areas, if you look at the strategic plan, that the gliders touched on were marine operations, coastal hazards, healthy ecosystems, and living resources. And for the cross-cutting themes in that plan, data communication, data management and communication, numerical modeling, and forecasting. For USM, some of the applications identified were weather and hurricane intensity forecasts and ocean bio-optical properties. For Mote Marine Lab, it was real-time harmful algal bloom monitoring, early warning systems and mitigation strategies, research on coastal water quality and ecosystem health, and supporting water quality monitoring and public health advisories. And for University of South Florida, it was hurricane intensity forecasting. Next. Challenges. So for USM, shark attacks were a challenge. We've recovered a fairly large piece of shark tooth from the body of one of our Hefring gliders. For Mote Marine Lab, replacement of obsolete electrical components, operational challenges due to hurricanes and heavy waves, plumbing issues with the gliders, and shortened missions due to unexpected asset. And for University of South Florida, it's that there's no operational funds for glider works for 2024. Next. For the HF radar, primary stakeholders identified were Naval Oceanographic Office, NOAA, IOOS Data Glider, should be IOOS High Frequency Radar Data Assembly Center, EPA, Florida Wildlife Commission, Texas Water Development Board, Texas General Land Office, the Texas Integrated Flood Framework, and the Southeast Texas RAIN. Applications of data. So the focus areas, it pretty much hit all the focus areas and the cross-cutting themes of data management and communication and numerical modeling and forecasting. And some examples from USM is oiling forecasts during the Deepwater Horizon incident, understanding the advection of Carinthia brevis blooms into Mississippi waters, and impacts of freshets from Mobile Bay on a mass die-off of bottlenose dolphins. For the rates group, examples were facilitating safe navigation and transport models in Galveston Bay and Sabine Lake, improving hydrodynamic models for storm surge and flooding, and informing management of coastal resources and tracking pollutant plumes and oil spills. Next. And for Fugaro, it was observational oceanography to support marine operations and coastal hazards. Challenges and needs. So for USM, aging CODAR stations, damage to components from storm surge, lightning strikes, rodents, and maintenance crews, failure of accessory electronics, long approval times for operating agreements for one of the sites, and level of funding not keeping pace with inflation. For the rates group, challenges were damaged RF cable bundles and faulty CSON units. And for Fugaro, storm damage to site and antennas, restricted access to their sites due to COVID, and incompatible updates to remote support software. And I think that's it, but is there another slide?
Nope, that's all.
And I guess I would add one quick thing is that we still, I mean, we're with the new money to LSU, it's going to help, but the gaps in the Gulf are bigger than Maracus. So, you know, the gaps in the HF radar coverage.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. With that, we have any questions?
Joe, you had your hand up during the last set of presentations, so I wanted you to give an opportunity to ask your question if you're still on.
Yeah, Kim, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Just going back to Brian's talk about the wave measurements back at Buoy Center, you know, where my heart has always been. Quality control of the wave data has always been a huge issue. I mean, we wrestled with it for a long time, and we always were trying to get it better. And I was wondering what Brian's plan is going forward for the quality control of his wave data.
Yeah. So right now, I think our current
Brian, we seem to have lost your audio.
that we'll try to get a sense of how good or bad the data is typically coming in, right? You know, what the order of magnitude of that data is, and how bad it is. And so I think our current plan is to compare it to existing regional assets to get a sense of, is it in the right ballpark, or are there times when it's just way out of line? And that's going to be our first step in sort of assessing quality control, is just how is it doing relative to regional assets that are in place.
Yeah, first step indeed, but you know, still a long way to go before it's, you know, ready to go on to GTS, for example. It's a tough problem.
There are studies, you know, showing a really good comparison between the data well waves and the SOFAR.
Yeah, I mean, the literature out there, it does suggest these SOFAR buoys are generally very accurate. You know, if you follow the manufacturer's sort of mooring instructions, which is generally what we're doing. And so, yeah, I think our hope is that the existing software that processes these data will give us a pretty good sense of how the wave field is doing. And if we're seeing big problems, then we'll have to probably revisit how we're doing quality control, developing a more robust quality control methodology.
Yeah, having the data well there is really helpful. Good, thank you.
Kim?
Stephen, I have a question. Knowing the changing financial climate that we might be moving into, and seeing the challenges and needs lists across all these groups, do you have a sense for what some of the highest priority, both challenges and needs, might be to create better efficiencies to keep these stations operational?
Yeah, that's a hard question because, you know, you're kind of limited, like from an operational net design standpoint, how efficient you can be, because you know we're not yet at the place where we have overlapping coverage where we can get total currents all over the coastal Gulf. And you know, we don't have a lot of redundant measurements. So I mean, maybe there's efficiencies in changing the way we operate from having lots of different operators to, you know, bigger operators. I don't know. I mean, you know, there's a range of things that could be looked at. It would be challenging from the standpoint of the way the assets are owned by different universities. Like if you were, for example, to go to a model of a private sector contractor operating them. Right now, the radars are owned by different universities, and how would that be managed? I off the top of my head, I can't think right now of a lot of ways to make it more efficient.
Those are great comments, though. I do remember from one of our previous meetings talking to one of our Mexican counterparts about their HFR maintenance procedures, and that there might be some efficiencies there we could also look to for some of these recurring accessory electronic failures and pump, you know, replacements and gliders and stuff like that. So
yeah,
thank you.
one of the things that was helpful was the IOOS loaner program that allowed for, you know, if an operator had a piece of equipment down, that they could borrow a replacement while their equipment was being fixed or replaced, which helped reduce downtime. So that's an efficiency that, you know, in the current funding cycle, that kind of model might be jeopardized. And I don't know if Brian can say more about that.
I could briefly to say that that's an excellent program that Coder Ocean Sensors has partnered with the IOOS office to do, where it's kind of a lending library of spare parts, albeit limited. And I've requested funding for that again as one of my top priorities for this next cycle, to try to increase the resiliency of the network, like Stephen mentioned. But if that funding is compromised, then likewise that lending library would be no longer available to us, and we'd be subject to that much more outages.
Raphael, I've seen your hand up as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Stephen, I was just wondering if you have been able to do comparisons. I'm assuming that you are measuring currents with the gliders. Have you been able to do comparisons with the high frequency radar measurements?
Well, we don't have ADCPs on them. The only currents we can get are estimated from our our intended waypoints versus the, where they end up, and doing kind of a gross comparison. I haven't really tried that on the shelf. It's hard because there's a lot of reversing currents, so like the average currents wouldn't necessarily be very reflective of the surface. But other, moored current meters are we've done some comparisons to that. So,
Thanks.
but there are
Steve, I just
opportunities for drifters as well to do some comparisons with those.
Steve, south of Dauphin Island, we just recently used your data in a manuscript that's under review, and it looks pretty good relative to our ADCP measurements, and we're on the inner edge. So, I think it's a pretty well tested platform. There's a lot of robust literature comparing the near surface bins from ADCPs and drifters, like you said, to HF radars.
Yeah, when you look at the literature, I think probably the gold standard was I think it was the Ullman paper, maybe, where they took a cell, like a cell where there were two HF radar stations where the radials were crossing at 90 degrees. And they put drifters in, and as the drifters went out, they put them back in. So you're getting a real good comparison of the average current within a radar cell and to the radar current. And, and it was like, I don't know, 7 centimeters a second. I'm just remembering off the top of my head what the numbers were, but it was around that, like RMS.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Stephen. And we'll go ahead and move on. Perfect on time with Brian DZ. If you want to step up, we'll talk about buoys and moorings now. And I'll run the show, so just tell me when you're ready.
Sure. So I will say my audio has been cutting out in the last 15 minutes. It's island life. One of the downsides is our internet connection isn't always great. But I will say, so if I cut out, I apologize. But yeah, so with regard to moorings and buoys, we have a number of institutions that are deploying these things in the Gulf of Mexico that are supported by the Gulf of America, supported by GCOOS. And so universities listed here: University of Southern Mississippi, the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, Dauphin Island Sea Lab, LSU. And so I think the different institutions have slightly different packages on their setups, and I think we'll be getting that in the next slide. But this data is really useful. Real-time information in the coastal zone is used by lots of different stakeholders. Just speaking specifically about the setup we have in Alabama, we get people, just average boaters, but we're very close to the U.S. Naval Stennis operation, and so I'll get emails from them saying, "Hey, is your stuff up and running?" We get lots of different individuals. Alabama Department of Health uses some of our observations. There are just a litany of stakeholders that use data, real-time data from these buoys and moorings and observational platforms that we have in the Gulf. And I think most of these different, I'm very familiar with Alabama's, but I think listed here are these different universities have similar stakeholders in their areas who are using this data between sort of like what I said with the waves, the waves project. We have recreational users, commercial and industrial users that all take this data and incorporate it in different ways. Next slide. You can advance. Oh, is there?
I skipped it. Is it not going for you?
Oh, here it is. Yeah, it just got it. I think maybe there was a delay. Yeah. So yeah, next one.
I think it's a delay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, USM has been conducting long-term. So the main applications, as I sort of mentioned already, are marine operations, coastal hazards. Things like hurricanes, right? Water temperature from the coastal ocean is a critical element into understanding whether or not a storm is going to intensify. Also subsurface data, but certainly buoy data is going to help there. Just understanding the extent of the hazard, getting wind data from these coastal stations is going to be a big player in forecasting and putting out warnings to different individuals. Ecosystem health and living resources. As I mentioned, the health department in Alabama, they make decisions about oyster season based on some of the information that we're providing in real time. So there's lots of general interest in that fit within the focused areas of GCOOS that involve buoys and moorings. And so, yeah, we have cross-cutting themes like education and outreach, long-term monitoring, and environmental data, right? So a lot of these buoys have been maintained for a long period of time. So we're getting sort of, GCOOS, we're celebrating 20 years, right? That's sort of right where we're getting quasi-climatologies, right? Ideally, we want 30 years, but in the ocean, 20 years is pretty darn good. And so, the stations that have been operating for 15, 20 years, that's building a really nice climate record of our coastal oceans. We also have, lots of education outreach, right? So a lot of this data has been incorporated into educational lessons, whether it's K through 12 or incorporated into like university classes. This data does come in handy. I know personally I use it in undergraduate labs. I use it in my graduate courses. So this data from the real-time buoy system is incorporated into education and outreach missions of different institutions. And as I mentioned, these different institutions, USM, CCF, DISL, LSU, we're all using slightly different we have different sort of setups in our buoys, but we're generally doing similar things, looking at water quality, meteorological information for weather and hurricane forecasting. Those types of the things are the areas of data that we're providing information on. Next slide. Oh yeah, I think there's a delay in what I'm seeing. Okay, here it is. Yep. And so if we get to some of the challenges and needs that we're experiencing or anticipating, I don't know if we want to address. I see Brian Roberts has a hand come up. Do we want to address those now in the discussion or afterwards? Brian, do you want to ask your question?
No, it's okay. It's more of a comment. So just wait till you're done.
Okay, sounds good.
Your last slide, so.
Yeah, so we're almost there. So with the challenges, I think, again, there are specific details in each one of these institutions, but I think broadly speaking, there's a lot of consistency across the board, right? So funding levels, right? Putting stuff in the ocean and keeping it there is very expensive. It's not just hardware, but it's also personnel, right? And then, in the academic environment, we don't keep up with inflation, right? Like, I got my first cost of living adjustment, in like 5 years this past December, right? Our salaries are just not keeping up with what expectations are. And so because of that, so I just recently lost personnel to the Navy, which pays a whole lot better and is still pretty local. And so, if I get a really good technician, they may end up going over to Stennis where they can get paid more and potentially get, a career advancement that's limited here at the Sea Lab, right? And so, keeping up with staffing is really important because the skilled technicians we have, we dumped several years of education into these folks, and then they just get up and move to a new institution. It really puts us back. Or if we don't keep up with salaries, that's a real issue. And then obviously hardware, stuff in the ocean wears. I think everybody in this call knows how abusive the marine environment is. And so stuff is going to break down and it needs to be replaced if we're going to maintain the continuity that we have at stations that we're maintaining. And then obviously we have the bigger issues of just extreme events, right? We're in the Gulf of Mexico, hurricanes like to rapidly intensify in this environment. Even if they don't rapidly intensify, just hurricanes in general tend to cause a lot of damage. I think you'll see that as a cross-cutting theme across all of these institutions. And then sort of obviously during the COVID years, a lot of our projects got slowed down and were made much more difficult during the COVID years. But, so this was kind of reporting out on some of the problems we've had. Hopefully we stay pandemic free for, 100 years, fingers crossed, if we could be so lucky. But yeah, and so I think that's generally what we're seeing that captures a lot of the similar cross-cutting themes in terms of the challenges and needs. Just gear needs to go in the water, it needs to be replaced, and we need to be able to pay people reasonable wages to keep them here to be working with us. Okay.
Perfect. That leaves about 5 minutes. So Brian, you want to ask your question now?
Sure. It's more of a comment and just a reminder. I thank you guys for giving all these updates on the challenges and what's going on and the different things that are directly funded by GCOOS. And I think that's sort of what my point is that here for the buoys and moorings, you're highlighting sort of the 4 core funded locations, but just reminding everybody that there are a lot more institutions that have individual monitoring that's taking place that's contributing to the data portal and how important that data portal is. For example, LUMCON, we've been contributing since 2000, our data that we collect from our monitoring program, and actually through the IRA funds is the first time that we've ever had funding for directly support from GCOOS for it. But that platform itself is really, really important. And that's really the main thing that I just want to remind everybody of, is that GCOOS, if GCOOS had all the money that they wanted, we would fund all of these programs and expand even the stations that exist. But we're only able to focus on a few of the many people are out there trying to come up with funds to provide the monitoring network. But that platform means that people can look at more extensive number of stations than just the ones that are highlighted here. That's all I really wanted to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a great note. I mean, and again, I think hopefully going forward, we're putting ourselves in a position so no matter what happens with the government, I mean, I guess if IOOS gone, that changes things. But I mean, if we see websites go down, the fact that GCOOS is collecting data from a lot of different sources and providing it to the public through things like Gandalf, I mean, I think these are really useful tools that, maybe we could sort of increase our usership and our stakeholder interest as these other things go down, if we're able to stay up, and just sort of support the marine activities that are going on that we know use these kinds of observations and these kinds of measurements.
Brian, thanks also for that comment. We sometimes find ourselves in a position where we can only report the information we know. And so this points to me that, in the future when we have these meetings, that these kinds of discussion sessions are good so that we can show you the information we get and then have our other stakeholders and data providers jump in to add to the discussion here. That's really important to us. So appreciate that comment.
And Stephen, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment that Brian is right about the importance of the integration of data in this integrated ocean observing system. And for example, with the gliders, there's University of Louisiana Lafayette, and Brian Dzwonkowski soon will be operating a glider. And those data are going to get into the GDAC and be available for the hurricane models, regardless of what the gliders are out there measuring for. And on the HF radar, there's, Texas A&M is running a bunch of radars, and hopefully Florida State will be soon through GCOOS funding. Yeah, that role of GCOOS in integrating all these different data assets is really important.
Raphael?
Just to piggyback on these previous comments, and sorry, we're deviating a bit of the main discussion of this segment, but it's not only data that has been supported over the years by GCOOS, but also independent data. For example, the NTL data set that was referred to earlier by Jorge. Those are full column currents collected since 2005. If you were to put together that in an organized system or funded by some institution, there's no way you can fund that. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of instrument years in there, and I think we need to highlight that as part of the benefits of GCOOS, right? And not only GCOOS, but the entire IOOS effort. That's really a significant contribution.
Agreed. All right. We've got time for one more question. If not, we'll move on. All right. Well, thank you, Brian. Up next, we have Nan Walker.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to you about the satellite remote sensing and numerical modeling projects, at least the ones I was assigned. Okay, so first, the first PI is Robert Laban. He's at the Colorado Center for Astrodynamics Research at University of Colorado, Boulder. Myself, I'm in the Department of Oceanography, Louisiana State University, and I direct the EarthScan laboratory. And the third one is Zachary Cobell, I believe you say his name, with the Water Institute of the Gulf in Baton Rouge. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do before I talk about the stakeholders. Bob is well known as a satellite altimetry expert, and he's been providing sea surface height data, mapping loop current, eddies in the Gulf for over 30 years. And my specialty is satellite sea surface temperature. Probably 25 years ago, I developed a declouded SST of the Gulf using GCOOS data. And once we had a better GCOOS instrument, which happened in, I think, 2018, then I updated that SST, declouded SST. So that's very useful for also tracking loop current and eddies and just looking at temperatures in general in the Gulf. And Zach Cobell is doing water level forecasting and development of forecasting systems. And I know less about exactly what he does, but I do know some things I'll share with you. Okay, so the stakeholders kind of were all lumped together. I know that Zach's stakeholders are the National Water Center and the National Ocean Service, who he's worked closely with. And then, you know, Bob and we share some stakeholders, such as the National Hurricane Center, the oil and gas industry, shipping, commercial and recreational fishermen, coastal communities, numerical modelers, academic researchers, their graduate students, and we do a lot of national and regional news interviews, especially during hurricane season. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so if we look at the focus areas, the main ones are marine operations and coastal hazards because of, you know, the nature of looking at loop current, the eddies, their interaction with hurricanes, for example. The cross-cutting themes are long-term environmental change, outreach and education, numerical modeling, data management, and communication were what were listed in the PI reports. Okay, so as I mentioned, Bob is an altimeter expert, so he's providing near real-time and historical satellite altimeter products, also known as sea surface height data. and he covers the Gulf primarily. And they're used, as I said, for monitoring loop current, warm core eddies, operational ocean activities, and outreach and education. His data is disseminated mainly on a dedicated altimeter webpage on the GCOOS website. And I learned recently that GCOOS personnel is overtaking some of the processing of his data, and which is going on that website. Okay, so my group at the EarthScan lab is producing the declouded sea surface temperature from GCOOS 16, but now we've updated to a new satellite, GCOOS 19. It's the ABI sensor, if you're familiar with GCOOS. It's much better than the previous sensor. So I'm doing a surveillance of the Gulf sea surface temperatures, also reveals temperature from the coast all the way to deep water. So for over 30 years, I've been monitoring loop current and eddy motions, and specifically the cold core eddies. So the temperature aids many things: hurricane intensity prediction, early detection of marine heat waves, for example. I have a couple other products which are MODIS True Color images covering the whole Gulf of Mexico. They're useful for a variety of things I don't have time to go into, but we can discuss them later. Also a real-time weather animation from GCOOS 19 at the moment with water vapor imagery. So this is an automatically updating animation of weather, basically. So you can do hurricane tracking with it, or tracking of extratropical storms in the winter. Okay, and my data is disseminated via the EarthScan Lab website primarily, but the SST is also being used as a data layer on Gandalf. And we provide an SST without a cloud mask and an SST with a cloud mask. So hopefully that is useful. And I don't know as much about what Zach is doing, but his report, well, the title of his project is Evaluation of Operational Model Frameworks and Model Coupling for Water Level Forecasting. I know he works closely with the National Water Center and the National Ocean Service in Tuscaloosa, and he focuses on workflow management, collaboration strategies, ensemble forecasting, and visualization techniques to support water level forecasting and rapid deployment of new forecast systems. So that's pretty much what I know about what he's doing from his report. He didn't really elaborate on, if he's covering the whole Gulf with his water level forecasting. He did mention using global models, so there's a lot I don't know there. Could you flip the slide for me, please? Next slide, please. Okay, so I just wanted to, if there's no time, we'll just go on to the challenges and the needs. I did have an image to show y'all. Okay, so CCAR, Bob mentions only one challenge, which is keeping up with the altimeter data product changes on Copernicus. I do know that Copernicus improved the spatial resolution from 1/4 degree to 1/8 of a degree recently. So the data is looking a lot better than it did before. In terms of EarthScan Lab's challenges, in the last year, the systems manager retired after working for ESL for 26 years. So that was pretty much of a challenge, but we made through it. We have our products still flowing with a new systems manager and a couple part-time people, and a new website is underway. Stay tuned for that. And Zach at the Water Institute said he was having some contracting delays, but it didn't seem to be, he needed a no-cost extension, but it didn't seem to be affecting him too much. So all in all, we don't seem to have quite as many challenges as some of the rest of the groups. Okay, so the only thing else, if I had any time left, which I doubt, I was going to show you an image.
No,
That,
we're good. I accidentally skipped over it, and I'll go back to it. We got about 6 minutes, so you're fine.
okay. Could you go back then?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So one thing I didn't mention, it was mentioned, and well, both Bob Laban and I have acquired big archives of data, especially and myself sea surface temperature and him sea surface height. His is on, like I said, a dedicated page at GCOOS. Mine is all housed on the EarthScan Lab website. And this is an example of some of the products that we've, something of a product that we made that integrates his sea surface height with my sea surface temperature. So he is making these every Monday at the moment. So the image you see is the sea surface temperature, the declouded sea surface temperature for Monday, and his altimetry data for Monday. So and you can, so the darks, the solid black line, the darkest line, is his 17 centimeter contour of sea surface height, which outlines the edge or the margin of the loop current and warm core eddies. And then there's other ISO lines, and I've marked the cold eddies CE so you can see where those are. But anyway, so we're monitoring the Gulf and providing this data in different ways to GCOOS. And we may do more in the future. We're not sure. Jorge is thinking about that. So I'll stop there and let everybody ask their questions. It'd be great to have those questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Nan. That was actually really exciting.
Okay, thanks.
Raphael, you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Nan. That's very interesting. That's part of what we do as well as a company. I was wondering if you have any plans to process or utilize this new altimeter mission data called SWOT. Are there any plans on your team to deal with that?
I haven't actually done much work with that. I had a student that did some interesting work over land. It was in a satellite oceanography class, but it was in the planning for many years. Bob and I started working together like in the early 90s. Off and on, we've been working together for a long time, 30 years. And in the early 2000s, that's when his major professor, George Bourne, was involved in planning that sensor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it finally came to fruition. It sounds very exciting. I haven't looked into it, but do you have plans on doing that?
Well, yes, the first, I guess, non-beta version of those imagery, that imagery is available now from NASA and the European Space Agency. So, it would be very interesting to see, how to do that.
Yeah.
Anywhere from assimilating into models all the way to having a high resolution map of all those features that you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, at the time that I first learned about that, like I said, in the early 2000s, Bob and I and Steve Anderson from Horizon Marine were studying cold core eddies, the frontal eddies that move along the margin of the loop current. And they moved so quickly that they were really a challenge to, the sea surface height data didn't really help us at all. And so we were taking our declouded sea surface temperature and animating them and watching them move that way. And, I did provide, there's a big MMS report on like kind of the climatology of cold core eddies, which some of you might have read anyway. But yeah, the SWOT should be perfect for studying some of those smaller scale, rapidly moving features.
So this is Pat. The the Navy has done some testing with assimilating it into real-time models, and they're using a multi-scale approach with different covariant, different length scales and their covariances and things like that. But it's not being done operationally yet. But it has been done in real time on a test case basis. And Raphael, I thought I could be wrong about this. I thought Avisa was already incorporating it into their composites, but
I don't know about that, Pat. But even if they are, since they average over a couple of
30
days
days
or 5 days, then
or
all
longer.
the high resolution is smeared out, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So it'd be better as a standalone product would have value for sure.
exactly. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
I need to study like the repeat coverage and all of that. I mean, I know it's like a spatial, it's like a raster image, I assume, not a raster image, but anyway, I don't know enough about the technology, but I need to look into it. Thanks for pointing that out, Raphael. Maybe we can talk more later.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Okay, sounds good.
Pat, did you have a question, or were you good? All right, perfect.
Nope.
Well,
Sorry.
thank you, Nan. And with that, we'll move on to our last investigator panel. I believe it's Ximping. Talk about ecosystems. So thank you. Take it away.
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Marcus. Well, first of all, I have never founded by GCOOS, so I was put into this panel by Kim, and because my colleague Sharon Herska, she's now out in the ocean chasing sargassum right now. So probably will mostly read through the slides and then hope to facilitate discussion. So this panel, well, the two projects were included in this panel, and then first one is led by Darren Heinrich from Texas A&M. He's online. If you have questions, you can ask him while he's here. And the second project is led by my colleague Sharon Herska. So the primary stakeholders for Darren's project, I think they are the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. They managed the oyster harvest ground, closure, opening, and also the Texas Department of State Health Services. Really, has determined whether the shellfish have any toxins, whether it's safe for human consumption. And for Sharon's project, that's mostly Texas coastal band communities, including the Mascon Island and North Padre Island, and also that's the other end of the Gulf, the FIU Sargassum Watch. Next, please. All right, so for the applications of data, the examples for GCOOS focus areas, that's mostly healthy ecosystem, living resources, and then human health and safety. And for the GCOOS cross-cutting themes, that's monitoring the long-term environmental changes, also include outreach and education. For the Texas A&M University part, the Darren's project, I know they have imaging flow cytobot installed at the Ramsey Ship Channel since I think 2011. That is to monitor the HABs cell concentration and provide public imaging data used to track the HAB blooms, coordinate sampling effort, and aid decision-making for shellfish harvest closures, which I said earlier. Also provide coastal management early warning of harmful algal blooms events. So the third one is to provide long-term, high-resolution phytoplankton community data for monitoring of the environmental changes. For my colleague Sharon's project, is to use camera to monitor the beaches for validation and monitoring of the sargassum along Texas coastal band. If you've ever been here, it's pretty bad right now, and then it was very bad in May 2010s. There was one time the piles of sargassum on the beaches, and it really smells and drives off the tourists. And now it's actually the tourism season is coming up. And then the second is the citizen science data collection activities for outreach and education. Next, please. So in terms of challenges and needs, Sharon didn't provide anything, so none reported. And then for Darren's project, this part of the Texas doesn't have a whole lot of hurricane activity, the strong ones, but in 2017 we did have a Hurricane Harvey and destroyed the Pure is not a hurricane per se, it's rather a loose barge ran into the pier, totally damaged, destroyed the pier, and then I think so went the imaging flow satellite. So hurricane damage, and then second is operational difficulties. Must refer here because since I got to UTMSI 9 months ago, I know Darren at least has come down twice to repair the instrument leaks. And also the repair time is long because those parts are not commonly replaceable. The parts not very easy to find, I guess. So I think we can open for discussions. And well, again, Darren is here, and I think he can answer questions if you have with regard to the imaging flow satellites. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Xianping. Jorge, question?
It's more a comment, Marcus. So on Sharon's project at UT Austin, MSI, she and I actually recently discussed one of her challenges. So her project involves collecting data, field data, at the beach by beach patrolling, also using web cameras by visual ID. And there is a third component that is the offshore to find and assess the sizes of the floating sargassum patches in the near shore. For that second part, she just in recent weeks, sargassum has started floating Texas beaches, and the opportunity for them to go offshore. And I believe one of the challenges has been that one other partner of this project is Dr. Chuan Min Hu from University of South Florida, who does the optical monitoring of sargassum using remote sensing. So he provides an alert Sharon with images that might be a day or two old, and so by the time Sharon's team is able to go offshore, those floating mats, they already moved. So it seems that she's still trying to figure out how to assess dispersal and movement of these mats to be efficient in reaching them and do the actual assessment. So just to complement the idea here.
Right, we did have a very brief conversation, and she mentioned the difficulty of using Chinese imaging data to match with the field observations. So, yeah, that's a challenge. And the other thing is, here we don't have a big boat yet. It's not very easy. You have to wait for very calm weather to go out. You'll have small boats mostly here.
Right, thank you for that, Xianping. One last thing is, this is the first project that I believe that IOOS has funded on sargassum observations, field observations to collect actual data. We funded USF and other groups to do other aspects of sargassum assessment, including the remote sensing for years. But all of these questions are exactly what should happen for us to work out those solutions and eventually propose a field monitoring manual. Basically, that's what it's one of the goals of this project. Thanks.
Any more questions? Darren, do you have any comments? No. All right, we can go back to Eric if he's still online. Just had a quick, essentially comment earlier for Brian DZ. As one example of data applications, property values in Southwest Florida were linked to widespread HAB events in 2018. So, yeah, I mean, that does not surprise me.
Yeah, so thanks, Brian, and thanks for putting these panels together. It's I've learned a lot so far, but yeah, we'll try and highlight some of these in the annual report, Jorge, and in our briefings to our Congress member. Really, we don't talk to him, we talk to his staff member. We've been trying to emphasize how important these are to many, many different users, and it's not just the federal government that's using these data. It's a lot of people are using it. So I think that's an important message for us, and we'll continue to hope for the best. So thanks.
All right. Well, thank you all to all our 4 panelists for that recap of some of our projects, and I'll turn it over to Kim.
Yes, thanks everyone. You know, we know that it's kind of a pain sometime to have to provide these PI progress reports, but we just want you to know we really appreciate the information, and we really do use this information to help us sort of gauge whether or not we're meeting our strategic plan objectives, and also to help us plan for future strategic plans and funding. So I just, you know, I want to express my appreciation to all of you for doing that. Our PIs do a great job at reporting. We clearly need to get a little bit better process for reporting from our non-funded data providers, and we'll work on that for sure. Really appreciate all the comments. I am going to share my screen for the next presentation, so just give me 1 second here. And I believe you can see my screen, is that correct? And you can also hear me. Great. Okay. We'd like to close the meeting today with a report out on the activities of our board of directors. We'd like to remind all of our members that our board of directors is here to support GCOOS and its members. And so we'd like to remind you of the duties that we try to provide for you all throughout the year. So our board of director duties include providing leadership on policy guidance to the executive director, and that's been a super important one this year for sure. We assist with a variety of coordination efforts throughout the region. We develop and approve fiscal policy for the organization. We establish communication with resource managers, state and federal government institutions, and leaders to help define ocean and coastal policy and management strategies. And we provide support for the GCOOS RA office through a variety of councils and task teams and working groups and government engagement, and by seeking funding support. And just to remind you, you know, we're working hard behind the scenes to do all of these types of activities to support all of you here. I want to walk you through some of the organizational support. Some of this has already been mentioned, and so I will just go through this very briefly. You heard earlier in a number of our presentations that we had board members provide congressional testimony, and again, thank you so much, Stephen. I had an opportunity to watch that live, and you did an outstanding job of that. We have other board members who provided letters of support to our representatives that were listed earlier. Our board members also participate on hiring and award review panels. So, you know, we assist with reviewing position descriptions and announcements. And we were very happy this year to bring Marcus on board as our new deputy director. And we also now have 3 Matt Howard Award candidates on board. And our board members are instrumental in reviewing those candidates and helping us select the awardees. We also provide, our board members provide representation and coordination among a lot of different organizations and agencies. Several of the federal agencies, a few examples are the IOOS Federal Advisory Committee, BOEM, BESI, the USGS. We also provide coordination across our EPA National Estuary programs, our NEARS locations, some of the national park sites, and marine sanctuaries. A lot of communications and coordination occur with our board members and members of these members of these agencies and institutions. This year, we're still collaborating with our Pointe-a-Chen Indian tribe, PASIT, and Sea Grant through one of our IRA awards, and we're very happy with that progress, or that project moving forward, and that relationship that has been developed over many years of hard work. And then, of course, we work across numerous academic institutions who are also represented on the board and outside of the board and among our members. I wanted to bring up a little bit about our GCOOS 5-year strategic plan review and update. I know we mentioned that we had a task team developed for this. During this past year, our board members helped develop a review process and guidelines to help us review the 2020 to 2025 strategic plan in preparation to inform development of a new 5-year plan for 2026 to 2030. The goal of that was to conduct assessment of our plans, goals, objectives, progress in implementing activities, identifying gaps, challenges, lessons learned, new priorities, and stakeholder needs to inform development of that new strategic plan. We also, as part of this process, helped interview and select a process facilitator to assist with the synthesis and application of our review findings for development of the new strategic plan. And we requested and received the PI progress reports to assist in the evaluation of the strategic plan, and also to help us identify future needs and challenges. And so that PI investigator panel was built on those progress reports, as I mentioned earlier, and it's essential to helping us evaluate our progress with the GCOOS strategic plan objectives and outcomes. So again, very many thanks to everyone for providing those. We have, because of all the challenges that were mentioned in the opening presentations that we have postponed this review and update, and we've redirected a lot of our efforts to helping implement the new administrative requirements and priorities, and also until we get better guidance, as you can see, that we need from IOOS and the IOOS RA, and helping Jorge sort of digest that guidance and understanding what that means for development of a new strategic plan. So we are on hold for that particular piece. We have a number of active GCOOS councils, task teams, and working groups that our board members participate on. The Outreach and Education Council, we have a Community Empowerment Task Team. You can see on the slide what those two particular council and task team entities do. We have an HFR Operator Working Group. We have a Gulf of America Hurricane Glider Team and National Underwater Glider User Group. And this past year, we had a Board of Directors Election Task Team. Our board members help with board member elections. We had a Matt Howard Scholarship Team this last year that was very active, and also our 20th Anniversary Task Team. So I'll walk you through a few of the results of those task teams. We had a very successful Board of Directors election again this past couple of months, and I want to thank Emily Hall and Rafael Ramos and Marcus for helping lead that task team to get the election done. As you know, we have 17 board members, and down at the bottom here you can see our new and returning members that will begin their new positions or returning positions during the fall of 2025 at our fall meeting. And so we wanted to welcome on board Nick Gagliano from So Far Ocean. He's in the private sector, and Jim Kindle from BOEM, who was elected to the government sector. And then we have returning to the private sector, Dr. Ruth Perry and Nan Walker, and also return from the education outreach sector, and then also returning to the government sector is Pat Hogan. And so I have little yellow stars you can see here on Jan Van Smeren and Tom Wissing, who will be retiring in the fall, and we have really appreciated all of their effort and help on the board. Our Matt Howard Scholarship Review task team. I want to give you a little bit of information about that. As many of you know, the Matt Howard Scholarship Fund provides support to students engaged in ocean science and/or data management to attend a professional conference. And this scholarship award began in 2020 and has been supported by donations. So previously, we've had 1 to 2 students per year supported to attend the conference and write an e-news article. And we've since expanded that experience to have these students engage with the GCOOS community to discuss their career interests, to help identify mentors for them and build their professional networks, and also include interaction with our board of director members. So we created a task team to provide guidance on all aspects of the award, from advertising and selection to expectations of the award recipients, so we can improve its utility for the students. Some of the key outcomes and needs that were discussed by the task team include the title of it. Turns out that the title of the award matters for students because of financial aid status, whether it's called a scholarship or a fellowship or award, matters for some of their program requirements at their various institutions. We also discussed that we really need discrete start and end dates and a clear statement of the expectation of the awardees, because the award is limited to only about $2,000, and so we have to make sure that the time commitment of these students is warranted. The selection process, we had discussions about who votes. This last year for the task for the awards, we had both a task team vote and our XCOM members vote. We know we need to improve the advertising and standardized branding for the opportunity. And one of the big issues is finding a long-term funding process for it. Again, it's been funded by donations, and we need to make sure that we've got a consistent source of funding to keep this moving forward. And also, as mentioned earlier, our 2025 award recipient was Defrosa Kataraya. She's a PhD student at FIU. And then our GCOOS 20th anniversary task team has been very busy. These are some of the activities that we have planned and have done and that want you to keep watching for coming. We do hope for our fall meeting to have a 20-year celebratory in-person meeting. And again, for all the reasons we've previously discussed, that is going to be funding dependent. We hope to have in-person planned special events. The location and date are to be determined, and we will keep you closely posted as to whether or not this will be a possibility as we learn more in the coming weeks and months. The 2025 all hands meeting in Biloxi, we had a GCOOS staff retreat in advance of the meeting, and this was already discussed. The new GCOOS GOA MOU was signed by Jorge and Laura Bowie as part of the plenary, and a lot of the GCOOS products and services were highlighted at both the GCOOS exhibit table and during the Tools Cafe. We've also, the task team has also introduced celebration logo merchandise, and actually I'm going to back up for a second. I meant to point that out. If you'll notice, this is one of our Outreach and Education Council members, one of our founding members, and it might be hard to see, but she's wearing a hat with our brand new 20th anniversary GCOOS logo on it. And so, again, we introduced the celebration logo merchandise at the GCOOS Outreach and Education Council meeting in December in New Orleans. We're in the process of developing a GCOOS merchandise site with the hopes that a portion of that proceeds will go to help fund the Matt Howard Scholarship Fund. And this merchandise will include the traditional logo, 20-year logos, and we're working on a special 20-year celebratory design. And then lastly, as part of our celebration, we've begun putting together history spotlights to showcase people and historic data and activities from the Gulf's ocean observing community in our e-newsletter and in our website and through social media. So watch for updates in the newsletter, watch for emails on anniversary updates, and we really hope that all of you are able to join us in the celebration in some way throughout the year. I believe that is my last slide. I'm going to close out of that. Are there any questions or comments from our staff or board members? Any corrections to any of the information that I put out? No. Okay. All right. If we have no questions or comments, then I'm going to give you some final comments here. First of all, very many thanks again for participating today. We know everyone's time is important, challenging times. Special thanks to our presenters and our meeting facilitators. Also really appreciate the great discussion during our discussion periods and the investigator panels. If you have any additional questions after the meeting that didn't get answered, please feel free to email them to either me or Chris or Marcus, and we'll make sure they get directed to the right people to get answered. And I just want to remind you that Bright Spot News, this is a very exciting year for GCOOS with our celebration of our 20th anniversary. And as I've shown you on these slides, there will be many ways you can participate through the year, so please watch for these updates on the celebration activities. And also reach out if you have a GCOOS highlight you'd like to share. We hope you'll be able to join us in person for more celebration activities at the fall meeting. And again, we'll provide you updates on how that's going. And if there are no other comments or questions, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn our meeting. Do I have a second?
A second. This is Zoraida.
Okay. All in favor? Raise your thumbs, your hands, or give me an eye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much again, everyone. It was really great to see you, and we hope to see you in person next time around. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Great.